Um,
I'm ready to go forward with the show.
Oh, I can tell this is going to be a sensible edition.
How did you do that? Look at Kath.
So Bob Ambrogi is on vacation, although he is here with us in a car in the rain in Florida. So I'm attempting to co-host today. Welcome to this week's Legal Tech Week in Review, News in a Review. What is it called? Legal Tech Week?
I'm not the only one who has
Legal Tech Week.
Legal Tech Week year, though, right? No.
Yes.
Legal Tech Week.
Bob, do you want to introduce yourself?
I am Bob Ambrogi, and I'm broadcasting from the Legal Tech Week mobile studio this week in not too sunny Florida at the moment. And I write the blog LawSites, and I also have the podcast LawNext. And did I just break up in the middle of that?
No, we heard you. I'm Joe Patrice from Above the Law and Thinking Like a Lawyer podcast, which is having its 200th episode next week. I have been informed. So tune in for 200 episodes worth of looking back on regrets that we have throughout the history of that show. But yeah, no, good to be here.
Victoria?
Hey everyone, my name is Victoria Hudgins. I'm based in Philadelphia and I write for Legal Tech News, which is an ALM publication where I cover primarily cybersecurity, the legal tech industry, and how lawyers are and usually aren't using technology.
Steve?
Hi, Steve Embry. I publish the blog TechLaw Crossroads, which is about legal innovation, disruption, and legal technology. And I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, where it's cold and we got a lot of snow, which is not good for us.
How about Victor?
Hi, everyone. I'm Victor Lee. I'm Assistant Managing Editor for the ABA Journal. I cover business of law and technology. And we got quite a bit of snow over here. We're definitely not in Cancun. We have, I think, more coming this weekend. So, looking forward to that.
No, we're not, Victor. We're really not. Caroline?
Just because we're not in Europe anymore, don't leave the Brit out, okay? I'm Caroline Hill, Editor-in-Chief of Legal IT Insider. And we write about legal technology globally, but I'm based in the UK and still living the lockdown dream.
Awesome. I'm Molly McDonough. I am a media strategist based in the Chicago area. I produce the show Legal Talk Today, write for the Legal Talk Network blog. So I'll feature Joe's blog in one of my next roundups when you hit 200. And I also write a blog called A Just Society. Bob, do you want to go first since you haven't written anything and you don't have any news to talk about?
Perfect. I mean, this whole show could just be the Ron Ponton Memorial Edition of this show. But no, I have actually been kind of away this week, and I have not been even closely following the legal tech news, I have to admit. But I did. One thing I could talk about is the LawNext podcast that I put up this week, because I thought it was actually kind of interesting. This company called Launch Factory. I did an interview with the founder of Launch Factory, and this is a guy who sold his business to Google for $85 million, and then he worked for Google for a couple of years, and he came up with the idea that he wanted to get back into helping to seed startups and get tech startups going, but he felt that where startups most often fail is in the idea that they have, that a lot of people, to get a business going, but they've just got a bad idea. And so his whole approach to this is he's put together this team of people who come up with really good ideas, or what they hope will be really good ideas for startups. And then they go out and beat the bushes to find founders to kind of take the reins on those startups and get them going. And so right this year, this is their third year of doing this, and they're getting into legal tech this year. They've got a couple of different ideas for legal tech startups. One is basically a sort of a dispute resolution forum for small claims cases, which I know other people have tried, but They've got an idea around that, and they've got another one related to cybersecurity. And so what they do is they're kind of holding this competition right now for people who want to be, anybody who wants to be a founder can apply. And they, if you kind of win, they team two founders together. They give you $300,000 to get you going. They set you up at an office in San Diego, which is not a bad place to be for a while. Give you mentoring and other kinds of guidance and introductions, and see how it gets going. So I thought it was really an interesting idea, and they're big on legal tech right now. They've got some other, they're, kind of want to see how this goes, but they feel like legal tech is an area where there's just huge potential, huge unrealized potential to develop. And so they'll see how this first couple ones go, but they may well get back into it after that.
So how do they ensure, some startups, they come up with you've got to start from the problem back and make sure that you're solving a real need. And often that comes from having been part of that industry. And, how do they make sure that, how do they connect the two? How do they make sure that they're solving real problems and sort of that there's a fit?
They've got this team, their ideation team that just does a lot of due diligence, a lot of study of different markets and different verticals, and they kind of look for where they see a gap and a need, and try and come up with a product that addresses it. So they've only been doing, as I say, this is only the third year, so the kind of the third cohort that they'll be doing. The first year, I think they only did one startup. The second year was like 2 or 3. So they don't have a huge track record yet to go by. But again, I think it's just an interesting approach to it. Maybe not the right approach, but it's interesting.
It's really interesting. No, really interesting. I read your piece and I was just thinking, God, I don't know what I thought about it. I thought it was really interesting, and I can see why they're doing it. I guess you just have to make sure you get the right fit. It'd be really fascinating to see what they come up with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to listen to the podcast. Actually, that sounds like something really interesting. But yeah, I guess for me,
wait, you haven't yet, Victor?
Sorry. I mean, I guess the question, my question would be like, what happens if? I mean, obviously, look, a good idea is a good idea, and like, someone pitches a great concept to someone. I mean, even if it's not their idea, if it's good enough and it's inspirational enough, then I'm sure they would, do their best to try to bring it to fruition. But I mean, yeah, like what if there's a disconnect between like the idea phase and then finding people who, may not be as passionate about it, but they still think, okay, well, I can work with this and see what happens. And then maybe the product and the end product isn't as good, or there's some kind of, miscommunication between, the conception and then the execution. So I guess I'd be interested to see what the results are from some of the other products that they created.
That's an interesting problem. I mean, they take a third interest and they team up. They'll find 2 founders and team them up, and the founders don't have to have applied together. They find 2 people that they think would be a right pair to take it. Each of those people get a third. So the founders have a 2/3 interest in it, and supposedly, they're pretty much free to do what they want to do. I mean, they're owners and they get the financing, so they don't have to stick to the original idea if they don't want to, if they see a way to vary from it or go away from it. But it's a boost, I guess, an initial boost.
Who wants to go next?
I can go.
Victoria, you have that. Yeah, you have a related topic, the flourishing of alternative legal services providers.
Yeah, my colleague Dan Packle last week, he wrote about the Thompson Reuters report that they released about ALSPs, and the market is growing. And most notable, the large increases with law firms, captive ALSPs, the ALSPs associated with law firms. And they said, I think I can find the specific statistics, 77, there's now, 70. There's now 79% of US law firms and 71% of corporations now report that they're using ALSPs compared to 72% and 70% respectively 2 years ago. And I think like Dan, he was talking about the increased usage of it is pretty much spurred by like law firms and corporate legal departments. They have less of a concern of that ALSP's quality isn't as good. Like they can pretty much figure out like, okay, they're the same quality of a law firm, but maybe their workflow is a little bit different. And most likely they're more efficient and cheaper. And the report also found that captive ALSPs, more of them are joining the market. And it's a little bit difficult to kind of distinguish like when a law firm has an ALSP, but the report said that it seems like they're having the sharpest growth. And I thought it was interesting just to see, like, of course, like some people say like, hey, some corporations maybe aren't sophisticated enough and they maybe just turn always to law firms for their needs. But I do think kind of like ALSPs aren't going anywhere. And this report is just highlighting that concept that ALSPs, they are really a contender for providing some legal services. And law firms, I think they kind of understand like, hey, they're not going anywhere. And you even see, law firms creating these ALSPs, or they're even introducing these ALSPs to their clients saying, hey, they can offer these services for some of these, they can maybe provide like the large scale document review that we maybe have for some of our projects.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, like it's not, one of the things we talk about a lot when we talk about technology is, when to draw the line on what you do yourself and what you let others do. And at some point in legal services, that's becoming an issue. That's becoming part of the equation as you kind of develop a more holistic approach to your business model. So it doesn't make sense to create everything from scratch. To me, this makes sense to me that this will continue to grow, and that law firms, even traditional firms, will use these services without reinventing the wheel each time.
And it makes sense from we talked about it before from the way they bill, the freedom they have away from the billable hour. To me it's a no-brainer, right? Like that so technology, when it bashes up against the billable hour, efficiency and the billable hour aren't necessarily best of friends. Whereas if you put it within the context of an ALSP, it has much more freedom in the way that they bill. Technology starts to make a lot more sense.
Yeah, and you see like some law firms are taking that initiative and saying like, hey, we will create these ALSPs. But some of them are kind of saying like, hey, we're not going to do the scale or do the investment, but we won't fight against using ALSPs. Sometimes we'll even bring them into the discussion. And I don't know if anyone else has anything else to add, but there was also an interesting piece that my colleague in New Jersey, he wrote about a group that isn't like an ALSP. They just kind of, I think they're based in Florida, and they connect plaintiffs' attorneys with potential plaintiffs, and they reach out to them through email and everything like that, and just kind of saying like, hey, reach out to these plaintiffs, you can maybe represent them. And this company, what is it, consumer...
ambulancechaser.com or no?
Oh. Consumer Awareness Group. They've been around since 2014. And they say, hey, and they even apparently give you kind of, email. Emails sent out, like they'll even send out emails to lawyers, like talking about the perceived value of various types of mass tort cases, like Roundup weed killer, users of Roundup weed killer that develop cancer, they could go for like $1,500 a piece. Clergy sex abuse claimants cost $2,500, and just emailing quotes and just kind of saying like, hey, you might be interested, and we can kind of, I don't know, it's like connect you or give you the names, and you can maybe reach out to them and ask, do they need representation? And according to my colleague, he reached out to some ethics advisors, and they said that this could really go against a lot of ethics in like all the states. And they said like, okay, this organization has been around for like 6 years, so apparently they are able to like make money. There's interested lawyers, and they said especially now during COVID-19, with so many courts that have limited services or they were shut down, a lot of plaintiffs' attorneys, they need, their business has kind of been they have less clients at this point because that some of the courts were closed down. And you might see some plaintiffs' attorneys saying like, I'll start using these services so I can find people that actually need representation. So it's kind of interesting to see, like, will there be increased usage? I don't think the organization said that was, but it's kind of like the market right now. It might have some lawyers that may be a little bit more desperate and use these types of platforms, which might run against like some ethical rules. So I thought that was interesting.
Well, I mean, there's some lawyers, especially the ones that advertise on TV full time or on the internet and whatnot. All they do is just advertise. And then, once they get their leads, then they farm them out to, lawyers that they know in specific states, like, that they work with or that they, have arrangements with and whatnot. But I guess that's the individual law firm or the law practice or the lawyer taking the initiative. I hadn't really heard of groups like this that, are kind of third party. But I mean, one thing that I thought was interesting was that, the part in the story where they were like, oh, well, we work with this law firm, and then there's law firm like, no, they don't. So
yeah,
that might be, I'd be interested to see how that goes.
Yeah,
there's kind of a model that go ahead.
Nope, go ahead.
I was just going to say that was kind of a model that a guy named Jim Sokolov in Boston pioneered many, many, many years ago of sort of, advertising all over TV and billboards and everything to hire the law offices of Jim Sokolov.
Yeah, he hit his own catchphrase.
Jim never took a case himself. He never practiced law. I mean, for the most part,
no,
he did early on.
I interviewed him. I interviewed him. Yeah, I think he, he hit his own catchphrase and everything, but he didn't actually try any of those cases.
Yeah.
Well, doesn't like every state, even though there are model rules, don't the states all have different variations, or many of them have different variations of when you can approach a victim or a potential plaintiff in a case? Like, it can't be like, you can't run up to a train wreck, it's like one of the ones I remember as an example, and just start picking off, being an ambulance chaser, literally following an ambulance. This seems a little close to that, but depends on, I guess it would depend on how far removed from the injury, and some of these seem longer term, and you're just finding it sounds like you're finding classes.
Yeah, and they've been around for like 7 years. I kind of wonder, and it kind of seems like they'll just like cold email people, like lawyers, and this is kind of like, has there been anyone like the state bars like saying like, hey, you can't do that or anything like that? So maybe they toe the line just enough where it's just kind of like, this wouldn't go against ethical rules. I don't know, but it did seem interesting. And definitely in Philadelphia, we have those daytime, when you're watching daytime TV, like during Judge Mathis or Judge Judy, and they'll have those lawyers saying, we'll help you out with all your cases. And then like you'll see in tiny print, like they're like a referral service type of thing, and you'll go to like another plaintiff's attorney.
Yeah, the whole referral service thing, which you learn your professional responsibility, there's limits to and are bad, but that was one of the few professional responsibility rules that I always heard and thought, well, that seems inefficient for the client. Like, why wouldn't you think it's better to refer the work to somebody who's a better specialist? It seemed like it was almost protectionist to force you into a one-stop, full service law firm, rather than admit, hey, I do tons of work with this person who does in trusts and estates. They have a litigation matter. Allow me to refer you to somebody else. But yeah, no, and hopefully there are places that have more liberal rules on that.
Well,
has anybody seen the bar associations? More of them are posting their lists of lawyers by what they do. And I never understood why some of those were so closed, because that makes sense to me that an association especially would want to promote that their members work in these particular areas. And it's not called referrals it depends on the state, but some of these specialty bar associations are really detailed. Like, I was looking at one of these matrimonial associations, and they have I was looking for experts for sources, and realized that, if I were looking for a lawyer to represent me, this would be a great resource. And I hadn't seen that very much. And I'm kind of surprised that more bar groups don't do that.
Yeah, isn't the real ethical issue sort of, it's the same thing that Avo ran into when they had that legal referral system a few years ago, because they weren't lawyers with a law firm. And so therefore they were splitting fees definitionally with a lawyer, and that's where they ran into trouble. So it's interesting that there could be this group that is out finding plaintiffs that, I don't know, are they a law firm or lawyers, or I don't know. That seems kind of odd.
Yeah, and consumer awareness group, like they aren't lawyers and they just say like, we're highlighting like potential claimants, not clients, and just kind of like, they may have litigation, that type of thing. So I guess they're trying to say they toe that line, but it's interesting and kind of like, I can definitely see in this time frame, like, some lawyers, the work may have kind of dried up for them right now with some of the courts like being a little backlogged, and just kind of like, will more use these types of services? So.
Yeah, and it brings up some interesting issues. So if they're not getting a fee, a referral fee, but they're just sort of connecting people and they make their money by advertisements from law firms or what have you.
A law firm may pay them a marketing fee, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of maybe an interesting way around this somewhat silly ethical rule that you can't split a fee with a non-lawyer. Maybe somewhat probably could be left out.
Yeah. Yeah. There's lots of leeway around that kind of antiquated rule. And, there's all sorts of sites out there that are making those connections. And generally they do refer to it as a marketing fee. And I think that's supposed to make it okay. It's essentially the same thing. One way or another, however you call the fee. But I haven't seen any bars prosecuting lawyers for violations of that sort of fee sharing rule in a long time. There were the cases with Avo, and those have been many years past, and I haven't seen anything like that for quite a while.
Yeah, it could be. It could be a real benefit, particularly to smaller plaintiffs firms that are trying to compete, against the Morgan and Morgans of the world, and trying to find these kind of clients. And those smaller plaintiffs firms, they're having a lot of trouble, these days in trying to compete. So it could be a very good thing. I don't mean to imply it's a bad thing at all.
I can say, being down here in Florida, it sure feels like there are a lot of lawyers down here. It's like every billboard sign and every main street you walk down is full of law offices, and everywhere you look, there's an advertisement for a lawyer somewhere. It ain't like Massachusetts,
which is lawless.
Yeah. No, we've got plenty of lawyers. They're just a little more discreet. I don't know.
I was just talking earlier this week about lawyer advertising, and that's a whole nother fun topic,
right?
With the web. I don't think we have a lawyer advertising topic, but who wants to go next?
It sort of the whole court thing leads into your interesting story, Molly, in terms of the piece by Jason about digitizing the courts. That's sort of on.
Sure,
I've got a couple of things, but it's yours. I think yours is more on topic of what we just talked about.
So Jason, I actually thought about it a couple of points back with the incubator approach with the founders. That one of the things that Jason Touche is a long time writer in legal technology spaces and access to justice, and he created a proposal for remaking the courts, digitizing the court system, the state court system, and having the federal government take the lead. And the Day One project, which is an initiative of the National Federation of Scientists, took this on as a policy proposal. And so now Day One helped Jason formulate this into an actual federal policy, and published it on their site. And I'll post a link in a second. And it's a really interesting proposal. At first, I had sticker shock because the number didn't change. It's $1 billion, but it's meant to be kind of a one-time, once in a generation expense for the federal government to get this started for the states and to help the states develop a better digitize and upgrade their systems, which would create a ton of efficiencies. So I thought it was really interesting that it got picked up. It was a few weeks ago, but it kept getting pushed down on my list of things to mention. But I thought it was really interesting, and I think it's kind of picking up interest since it's been published on day one.
Is it for? I mean, just when I didn't have a chance to look at it in detail, but what hit me was the enormity of it, and that's an enormous number. When they say digitizing, are they going to start with like how do you have an insight into how that, like in the UK, there's been inroads into digitizing the courts, and they started with criminal. They've made more progress, and also I'm curious about what digitizing really means, because obviously it can mean different things, but have they clarified what they mean, what their objective is in terms of, they're going to do the whole gamut, or what, are they going to focus on a particular thing to start with?
It's aimed at access to justice. So you're really kind of bringing in some uniformity to the state court system. So in a way that is replicable, so that the idea is that you don't have every jurisdiction in every state creating something different. Instead, you have a federal model that can help states get started and work from and replicate projects from there. That's my understanding. The more I dig into it, the more I feel like I thought that $1 billion was a lot of money, and now I feel like that's probably a low ball.
Right? I mean, it just seems a huge. So what they're doing is they're creating a franchise, like a court franchise.
I don't know that Jason would have put it that way, but I kind of wonder if that's maybe.
What was it that Everett Texan said? It's like $1 billion here and $1 billion there, and pretty soon you're talking about real money or whatever.
That was Illinois Senator Erickson, right?
Everett Dirksen, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
or Dirksen, yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting because I was speaking to somebody about analytics the other day, and they focus on analytics at the state level, which obviously, we talk about the stuff that Lexis is doing, which typically, I know they're moving more to state, but it has typically been focused more at the federal level instead of state. It'd be interesting to see, I know it's very early days, but it'd be interesting to see whether, what kind of intelligence people start to get, and whether that starts to open up more analytics in terms of what the states are doing. What the courts are doing at state level, rather.
So it's my understanding that some of this is more focused on, some of what Jason's proposing is more focused on the policy development and standardization. And my only concern about that, other than the Wild West isn't helping anyone right now, is that the federal government isn't known for being super efficient.
I know there's a regular attendee on this.
All
right. Well, there we go. There we've lost Bob.
We've lost Bob for now.
Either that or he's got a peak of amazement.
and let's be fair. Like, you say the Wild West isn't helping anybody, but it's absolutely helping established lawyers who try to keep other people from getting justice. Like, we're doing a great job of that.
That is true. So
I mean, look, like Molly and I know Jason pretty well. I mean, I wouldn't put anything past him. I mean, and I mean that in a good way. Like, I mean, when he puts his mind to something, he's very capable. I mean, whenever I hear federal government creating standards for all the states to follow, the first thing I think of is, oh God, good luck with that. I mean.
Lost me.
Okay.
Wait,
all right.
Bob,
we see. Are you live? Are you not a cat? I need that.
Oh, you're back. You're
back.
I didn't even know I was gone. I could see and hear everything, so I just lost it.
We were sort of.
Were you talking the whole time?
I was talking. Yeah. Well, what I was saying is, I know that there's somebody who attends this roundtable every week from the National Center for State Courts, and Jim McMillan is, I think, on today, and I don't know if he has any insights on this, but it seems to me that one of the issues with Jason's proposal is ultimately getting all the states to buy into this kind of common universal approach. I mean, they should do that at some point, but it seems like a long ways away before we get to that, because you already currently using so many different formats and systems, and I think ideally and ultimately we will move toward a sort of a common data format, but it seems like a long ways off.
Yeah. Long way. Do you want to hear my M&A story?
Yes, I do. Jim, do you want to say something? Do you want to add anything?
Oh, sorry.
He just responded.
I'm sorry.
In the chat.
Oh, hey Jim, sorry about that. Bob sounded like a drunk Cylon.
Why don't you go ahead, Caroline?
Sorry to just go. Hey, do you want me to talk about me instead of Jim? Sorry, apologies. Yeah. So we.
Well, wait. I want to clarify, because I realize not everyone's going to see this through this format. So we should clarify that Dennis Kennedy just said in the chat that for a moment Bob sounded like a drunk Cylon from Battlestar Galactica,
Oh, yeah,
which is an incredibly accurate depiction, assuming we're talking about the first classic Battlestar Galactica. And I think it's important that we make sure that the future listeners to this understand that just happened. By all means, go on.
Dennis, what have you done? Yeah, so it's interesting. So we were given a sneak peek some M&A tables that are out. It's a guy called Raymond, and I'm going to murder his surname, Bleed, he's based in Amsterdam. He's previously worked at Wolters Kluwer. I called him a data wizard. And his company is called Legal Complex, and they've launched some easily accessible dashboards for people to look at what's going on in the sector. And we got the first look at some M&A tables, which the results are really incredible in terms of the number of both the volume of legal tech M&A and also the value. So just reading it from, I'll post the link. The tables actually we've got some of the information, but it is under a paywall. But so the tables show that the total value of disclosed legal tech investments is up 147% in the past year, so since the end of 2019, and the volume is up 31%. And then just to drill down into that a bit more. So the number of deals, so January this year, the number of legal tech deals disclosed was 19. Compared with 9 in the last year. It's just really interesting. It just shows what we're all seeing, which is, that the sector is of huge interest to private equity and also just consolidation and whatever it might be. And then just lastly, the biggest deal, I'd forgotten how big it was, but so it was the Clarivate Analytics acquisition of CPA Global for 6.7 billion. And I suppose the other last thing is that most of the acquisitions are in the contract space, which I don't think any of us will be particularly surprised about. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting, and I'll post the link in the chat.
Yeah, that is interesting and goes with like what we've all been seeing over the past 12 months, even with COVID-19. I was kind of worried, would people still want to invest in legal tech of all things kind of, but you've seen, I remember talking to legal tech investors in April or late March, and they said, no, of course, maybe this quarter, it may cool down a little bit activity just because people are getting acclimated to working from home and not being able to take flights, but it's still the market is still there and it still needs efficiency, and the demand for becoming more efficient and using technology is still there, and kind of we still seen that traction with legal tech companies being acquired or gaining investments. That demand still isn't going away. So it is interesting. And of course, contracts and analytics and management and collection, that's still a big deal. And kind of we see those companies gaining a lot of traction, and also practice management and everything. So yeah. I'm kind of surprised, even though investors that I spoke to, they said, no, I don't see it calming down the investments, and just kind of shows this is a market where that need is still there. And investors are saying hey, this is someplace that we can invest and get a profit back from. So.
And they've had to. So with, for example, the contract space, so where we've had COVID and people have been forced to digitize, right? So I think that we've seen I think there's not been, I'm not surprised that there's not been a drop off. And it seems like the pipeline is just predicted to continue in the same way, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, and I've always wondered what these investments are like, the actual like legal community actually using these products and everything. And with COVID-19 and working from home, I think it's kind of like you can't do the same. Well, for the most part, I don't think you can still have the same process as you would for like, you know, putting together a contract, having it signed and everything like that when everyone was back in the office. And kind of like you have to go be more in like the 21st century about how like you maintain, you know, start your contracts, have it signed, go reviewing it and everything like that. So kind of like COVID-19 accelerated that adoption. And I think like the investments to me make a little bit more sense because you actually have the market. They're actually acting like this is the 21st century and not ignoring technology.
100%. The culture is the biggest shift in a way, isn't it? The culture is the fascinating thing, you know, that there was always sort of the blocker in the past. And now everyone's like, yeah, sure, I'm doing depositions on Zoom. And then just, I've got one quick one. So I didn't talk about Microsoft for Legal. I'll perhaps do that next week because this is more relevant. So iManage this week did published a study which was looked into it was a Forrester consulting study which looked at ROI, and again I'd say that's relevant because you know it sort of drills down. There's been a lot of talk about technology and growth of technology and all of this kind of stuff, but we don't really see that many vendors really publishing deep studies into ROI and adoption. So I just thought it was worth a shout out. I'll post that link as well. And kind of sort of, I'm quite a fan of this idea of more vendors. We keep meaning to do a lot more deep dives into ROI and adoption, and hopefully still will do that. But actually, I think maybe the idea of vendors themselves commissioning their own reports is to be commended. I don't know what anyone else thinks about it. I'll put the link as well.
Well, you always have to look at them. You always have to be a little bit dubious when you look at some of those vendor commission reports. I haven't seen the one you're talking about, but
that's interesting you said it. This is Forrester, right? And when I first looked at it, I must be honest, I was a bit like, and I didn't write about it straight away. But then I started having conversations, and there seems to be a big appetite for it. There's been good response on LinkedIn. I know what you mean. So I had the same thought process, especially the ROI is so high and the time savings are so high. But I mean, there seems to be a demand, you know, it seems to have been really well received. It's independent. I don't know how with those, like something like Forrester, whether you could, I don't know. What are your thoughts? I'm not really sure. I was cynical, but now I'm a fan.
So when I was doing this as a publisher of a legal magazine and accepting studies like this, you know, they would be labeled either as advertising or, you know, as white papers that are sponsored or something like that. And they were still, the content was still, no matter what types of disclosures we put on them, were still really popular. And I think that, you know, as long as they offer some insights, they're great, but then I would rely on, you know, a Victor or, you know, to put some context around it and add some critical reporting to the pieces. Yeah. But in general, I think a lot of these vendor created or vendor commissioned pieces are pretty interesting.
Yeah, so
that's what's funny about it is readers like that stuff. Yeah.
They really like it. And I spoke to Dan Carmel, the CMO of iManage, and it was actually after the fact. I'm probably going to do a follow-up piece because I didn't have a chance before. You know, these reports, sometimes we just need a bit more notice, people. So I had a conversation after the event and started drilling down into the numbers a little bit more. And yeah, I mean, it does seem, you know, it's quite impressive. And Dan O'Day says that they charge around 40K for these studies. I think they're valuable. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, Molly, that you could class them as advertising. I can see why. And part of me just, you know, I don't know, part of me inherently just goes, oh, I just didn't touch that. But everyone it's got a lot of traction on LinkedIn. So
I meant by advertising is if they publish them themselves, if it's their publishing in, on your platform. But if you're reporting on it and adding context, then that's different. You would add some other studies or related, pieces.
Well, and there was I know, I'm trying to remember, there was a piece a couple of years ago I wrote about when I think it was Casetext hired some outside firm to compare, how fast a lawyer could complete a research assignment on Casetext versus Lexis. And it was sort of interesting. And my attitude was a little bit, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just reporting, what this study found. And it was purportedly an independent study, but it was financed by Casetext and they set up all the parameters of it. And but I remember I put some language in my blog piece to sort of emphasizing this fact that it was paid for by Casetext, and therefore you had to sort of take that into account in evaluating the results. And I got so much crap from Casetext about that.
The last time I was on the show, I missed a couple, but we were doing those rants and raves, and my rant was going to be. See all these articles, particularly in the COVID area, and about, study finds that COVID vaccines cause two heads to grow. And there's all this big headline. You read all the way through it and you get down to the bottom and it says, oh, by the way, this study has not been peer reviewed. And, I can remember, particularly in the courtroom, even studies that are peer reviewed are subject to attack, but ones that are not peer reviewed. I could do a study on the effect of the COVID vaccine and announce something and put it out there and get it published. But that brings me to the point that you guys are making, and that is, in our world that we deal with, there is no peer reviewed other than us, I guess. And lots of these studies come out, and I'm probably guilty of sort of running with the results sometimes without really sitting down and digging into the study itself, how they did it, how many people were sampled, who was sampled, what were the questions that were asked. There's a lot of room if we're not careful, particularly as journalists, and I use that term very broadly if I throw myself in there, particularly in this space, to be questioning of some of these studies, whether it's a vendor or not a vendor, because without a peer review process, anybody could study anything and announce it, and there we go. So now I don't have to do a rant because I just did.
Yeah, that could be your rant. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I think because there is an independence for the nature of forester, but then they do pay. I don't know, I'm confused about it, but the questions they did do this. So they spoke to 6 different organizations and hundreds of people, and they created a sort of framework of to make sure that it was quite sort of a different size, so representative of different size organizations. And they seem to put, when you look into how they did it, seem to be very thoughtful in terms of trying to make sure that the results weren't skewed and this kind of thing. What would have happened if the results have been crap? I guess that's the interesting thing, right? And I suppose you would want to say, well, they should, but they're not going to report the crap stuff. So, but the results are, they seem to have drilled down pretty deep. They spoke to a ton of people, and they looked at productivity. They analyzed. They show how they came to how they take a fairly deep dive into how they've come to their ROI. I would say,
and part of it too is how you ask the question, because if I have a result in mind, I can frame the question in a way that will get to the result that I want to get to. If I'm, reasonably careful, it's like, cross-examining a witness. You know what you want to get him or her to say, so you frame the question a certain way, and so it's just kind of an interesting area, I think, for all of us in this community, because there's so many of these studies out there. They come out all the time. And, as I say, I'm as guilty as anybody. I sometimes don't dig into what was really done enough to know how valid or not valid they are.
We don't normally run, sorry, Bob.
Go ahead.
Sorry, we don't normally, I'm quite often on the side of not running with it, but I think because the specific topic of ROI is of interest to me, I thought it was, really jumped out, because I really wanted to flag that. I don't know whether I'm just not looking in the right places. But I don't really see. I feel that for me was the biggest thing. I'm like, actually encourage that, like, and then you're right. I think we need to get better at interrogating the results. But I feel like more vendors should be doing this. I suppose that was my kind of angle, as it were.
Yeah,
Caroline,
what I was going to say is,
no, go for it.
I was just going to say that I think what often happens with these vendor sponsored reports is the place you have to really be kind of skeptical is the way they spin it. I mean, sometimes the data that they're collecting is interesting and it seems to be done in some legitimate way, but they always seem to manage to spin it at the end to favor whatever product they happen to have. So, they might do a study of e-billing practices among corporate legal departments. It just so happens they have an e-billing platform, and they spin it at the end to say the conclusion is that corporate legal departments need a platform that does exactly what we do. So I think you can use the data and get an interesting story out of it without necessarily buying into their ultimate conclusion or the way they spin it.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say the point you made, Caroline, about what happens if it's bad results and they may not come out is actually kind of the big part of a lot of this, because I think there's always good positive data that comes out of funded reports, but then you don't see the bad stuff. And it goes to that old archaeology maxim that the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence, right? Like that just because you can't find something doesn't mean it's untrue. And there's probably a lot of corporation funded research that we just don't get the benefit of knowing because they have no obligation to get it. I assume, though I do not know, but I assume we knew that cigarettes were harmful way back in the 30s, but we never heard about it. And that's the kind of thing that is always in the back of your mind whenever you applaud some industry research.
And I guess we should encourage, I feel like it's almost a quid pro quo thing or whatever, that we should, if they're celebrating the positives, perhaps we should encourage the obligation to disclose the stuff that is like the learning, right? You go, do you know what, if I'm going to help you celebrate all of there's actually, why don't you share some of the less positive results? Because actually that's not necessarily a failure, right? And actually that's probably where the end user would get the most value, going, okay, so everyone's having a problem with that. And actually for both, I think that's where it's not necessarily, I think that's where we see these, I mean, if it's complete failure, that may be, but there's certain results which by showing them, it wouldn't be seen as failure. Does that make sense?
And they have that data, and that's what a lot of them use to develop products. So, it's a question of, well, how do I release this without giving up my competitive advantage in developing a product that this is I found this to be a pain point and we're going to work on solving it as part of our research and development. That's another part of, doing this research. There's a reason some of these, especially deeper funded vendors, do this type of research. It's also for research and development for their own product development. But speaking of what vendors want, Victor, do you want to talk about the manifesto?
Yeah, sure. I thought this was interesting. I guess this has been in the works since December, but they released it this week. So Matt Homann, someone I think most of us know, he brought together a bunch of vendors who I guess were dissatisfied with the way things have been going for them at the virtual legal conferences and legal tech conferences and whatnot, not being able to get a return on investment for their products, and just overall finding the atmosphere very difficult for them and not very conducive for their purposes, but then also kind of maybe seeing how they could possibly improve things and whatnot. So they came up with this manifesto that I thought was interesting, and I was just wondering because it's a topic that we've talked about on this show a lot about what are conferences going to look like going forward. Is it going to be just everything back to normal, or is it going to be some kind of hybrid between virtual and live? And then I think one thing that they were very big on was they wanted to be considered like an equal partner as far as coming up with a game plan for how things are going to look going forward, and wanting to be more involved in planning conferences, but also making sure that they get value out of it and attendees get value out of it. So I don't know. I mean with these manifestos, it's always hard to kind of gauge like how effective they'll be, because a lot of it is obviously aspirational, but just it touches on a lot of things that we've been talking about, and a lot of things that we've been kind of wondering ourselves. I just thought it was interesting.
Anyone?
Yeah,
wanna
I was
add?
just like glancing over like some of the bullet points that they suggested of kind of like improving the virtual conferences, especially for vendors. And I do like the idea of kind of like offering discounts in exchange for engagement in data, kind of like encouraging people, because I know when I go to these conferences, I don't necessarily, it's not like I'm physically going somewhere. So there's no real pressure for me or any push for me to go to the vendors and walk the floor and just look at the products there and speak to people there. And I think kind of like encouraging, I think they maybe had one part where they mentioned when people leave sessions that they maybe like see the vendors or, like a mini vendor hall where they might be exposed to solutions and that type of thing, like encouraging more people to actually go to the vendors. I think they need to like rechange that and not just have like a tab on the side of a website and say, hey, these are the vendors that are participating. So I think like encouraging that and maybe, enticing us a little bit more and not necessarily forcing, but maybe putting vendors a little bit more like they're them kind of like in our face a little bit more, not to the point where it's annoying and I feel like I'm being spammed, but just kind of like saying, hey, they're here and, they want to talk about their product or maybe to help you.
Well, since Nikki's not here, I will take up for her cause, and that is we just need avatars. That's all we need.
Well done.
The conference that I went to where we had the avatars, I really have enjoyed that one more than any one that I've been to, quite honestly. It was really fun, and maybe because it was just so different, but it was fun.
In fairness, one of the things that we're talking about at Above the Law internally is this non-event that we're thinking putting on, which is kind of based around putting on, but putting on. Well, in some ways, putting off. If it's a non-event, why isn't it also putting off? But what we're trying to do with it is do something that foregrounds exhibitors rather than makes them a sideshow to different little events. And so we've been playing around with it and we're putting some stuff together. And but a lot of these ideas that you're talking about here are like part of what's happening internally in our discussions, because we're hoping for something that can give value to the exhibitors more so than because other shows are doing great content. We want to do something that can show the exhibitors out there and put them in the spotlight, but also draw people in. And so, it's been an interesting thought experiment. It's like one of those situations where if we were all physically together, we would be in front of a whiteboard all the time. Like, what if we did this and that? So we'll see. Hopefully that works out.
Do you remember when I spoke at the skills, the KM? Oh my God. Wait, sorry about that.
All right. Did you get a hams or what is that?
I got a frosty drink.
There we go.
Okay. It didn't crash out.
Table service, huh? That's
Thank you.
So, actually, Caroline, I don't think you were here when when we all learned that this is the official Hams Beer Appreciation Conference. That's what we do here. So
I think
just so you know. All right.
I think this is given. But sorry. So when I spoke at the Skills Knowledge Management Conference, and I think I came on straight after that, sort of ranting and raving about. But they used this platform called Shindig. And they avoided that awful exhibitor hall scenario, which is just nobody wants to go to. And they had all of the sponsors just mingling within Shindig. I won't go on about it because I went on about it enough at the time. But there, you could jump in the same way as sponsors would want to network within a group of people. Then you could just do that within Shindig. I don't know. Did you, Joe, are you looking at some kind of networking groups type platform, or I suppose you probably can't say.
We're looking at a lot of things. A lot of this is above my pay grade. A lot of this is our wonderful business team that a lot of you all who listen to this show at least or participate in this show actively. I know there are many more listeners out there who listen to it later, but the people who participate actively all know those folks. But so there's a lot of decisions being made at their level that we have input to, but don't necessarily control. But yeah, we looked at a lot of things, and I suggested a lot of things. And Nikki's not here, but I suggested Avatar. Like, I did my part. Is all I'm saying.
Do you think that there are going to be, so with Legal Week, there were some really good actual commercials that were actually pretty effective, and I'm wondering if vendors are starting to invest in some of those short but effective and impactful commercial approaches, because that's a really, seems to me, expensive but easy way to work into a virtual conference.
It's almost like somebody might have suggested, hey, a way to do this is to tell a bunch of people to put together reasonably short and concise commercials, and we could air all those. No, exactly. I thought it was I said this back in October. I thought that was the way in which people could like have a exhibit hall-esque experience, but in a virtual world. And, I thought Legal Week did a good job of having some of those, but not like a ton. But yeah, no, I think that is a very valuable investment for people to be making right now.
Sounds like the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Well,
right.
I mean, no. Tom Brady doesn't have any involvement in any of this.
And my unbiased opinion is Legal Week year is the Super Bowl of legal tech. So that's just my unbiased opinion. Just completely unbiased.
Exactly. You should be debuting the premium campaigns at these big conferences. So.
Well, we're gonna have.
The last time I attended Legal Week in person, I guess it was still Legal Tech at that point. Tiki Barber was on the expo hall floor signing autographs for people, charging obviously, but signing autographs for people. So actually, I don't think he was on the Super Bowl team for the Giants. So I don't know if that.
No, he retired the year before. Yeah.
So
I
was going to say for ABA Tech Show, we're going to do the Startup Alley this year.
There you go.
The way we're doing it, it's going to be the opening. The pitch competition will be the opening event for ABA Tech Show, but we're just.
Fantastic.
This is perfect timing.
So
perfect
in about 10 minutes, he'll come back and tell us what he meant.
All the presenters just recorded to, and that's it. So.
Yeah.
I'm here.
Monica,
can't talk. You are not a cat.
Monica Sanders said Ilticon, so that's going to be fun. I so hope that I can get.
Always Ilticon.
So, do we have time to do Rants and Raves, or can we do Joe's Jones Day story?
I can make it a rant. Rant, and
awesome.
People can comment if they want. Hey, Jones Day got hacked, everybody. At least as far as we can tell, people are posting their documents on the dark web and asking folks if Jones Day wants to pay a ransom, or they will publish all the rest of them. And we've talked about ransomware on this show before. But yeah, Jones Day, of all firms, has now apparently been hacked. They are not really releasing a statement. They said something kind of vague about how, we were hit through this one attack. Multiple cybersecurity experts reached out to me and said that statement doesn't make any sense, that the kind of attack they say they were hit in is not something that actually fits with reality. Who knows, but they are the experts, not me. And so that's happening. So I put this out as a rant or rave situation because I am not taking a stance on whether or not someone being hacked, is a rant, or that Jones Day getting hacked is a rave. Go on.
Wow.
Well, I will say that part of me was tempted to download Onion or whatever the browser is, just to see what those documents were. But I figured now that could lead me down the rabbit hole. I'll come on next week. I'll be all.
They're not good. They're not good yet.
Yeah, I'll be all like QAnon, and I'll be all like wearing tinfoil and stuff. So I thought maybe I should just avoid it.
Right now, it's like cover letters and drafts and stuff, which raises questions of like, where are these documents? Which, if they're maybe they just grabbed some random like document management stuff, and they don't really have I'm not going to say incriminating when I'm talking about Jones Day. No, that's not what I'm going to say. Not not embarrassing emails from Jones Day. It's not like they necessarily have those or any of the compensation stuff where they pay people who beat children a bunch of money. Point is, what gets me about it though is and this is the tech angle, in a world where we've moved a lot of document management to maybe everything should be in one home. Maybe we should be indexing our emails and our documents that we're working on and our filings and everything all in one place. I mean, I don't know the techniques of how people steal things, but these days, maybe if in my day I would have said, oh, they just have cover letters. That means it wasn't that big a deal. They just got the drafts. They don't really have the juice that is our email conversations. But now, who knows? So we'll see.
We don't have time to go into this, but we should definitely readdress this because post SolarWinds, so there's a big conversation about the sophistication of law firms in dealing with supply chain, all of this kind of stuff. We should definitely address that another time.
And my topics generally we should put earlier because you never know how many of these.
Yeah, we should have talked about that. That's actually way more interesting. Cheers.
Well, it's the top of the hour, but I think we might have Bob back. Maybe. Do you want to close us out?
I don't think it's safe for me to try and talk. So thank you, Molly, for hosting. I appreciate it.
Well done, Molly.
All right, we'll start Rants and Raves earlier when Bob has a better connection.
See you next week.
Thanks,
Bye,
guys.
everyone.
Hi, guys.
Bye.